Hello my dear friends and fellows, today you will listen a story, The Echoing Silence, and see what we learn from it. Let's start. In the small, forgotten village of Ravenswood, where the sun seemed to shine less and the fog lingered like an uninvited guest, there stood an old mansion. The townsfolk called it the House of Echoes. No one lived there, not since the tragic death of the Sinclair family nearly a century ago. It was said that if you stood outside the house on a quiet night, you could hear whispers carried by the wind, voices of the departed Sinclairs. The villagers avoided the mansion, but curiosity has a way of tempting the brave and the foolish alike. One such person was Emily, a young woman with a thirst for adventure and a skepticism about the supernatural. Emily had heard the stories all her life, but she didn't believe in ghosts. So, on a dare from her friends, she decided to spend a night in the House of Echoes. Armed with only a flashlight, a blanket, and her bravado, Emily stepped through the creaking iron gate and into the overgrown yard. The mansion loomed before her, its windows like dark, empty eyes. She pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned in protest, and entered the dimly lit foyer. The air inside was cold, and it smelled of dust and decay. She explored the ground floor, finding nothing but cobwebs and broken furniture. The house seemed just as she had expected, old, abandoned, and utterly devoid of anything supernatural. But as the night deepened and the wind picked up, strange things began to happen. First, it was the footsteps. She heard them upstairs, soft but unmistakable, pacing back and forth. Emily dismissed them as the wind playing tricks on her. Then came the whispers. Faint, almost like a breeze, they seemed to come from all around her. She couldn't make out the words, but they sent a chill down her spine. Determined not to let fear get the better of her, Emily climbed the staircase, her flashlight flickering as she reached the landing. The footsteps stopped. The whispers ceased. But the silence was worse. It was heavy, oppressive, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. She entered a bedroom, where the air was even colder. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, untouched by the years of neglect. It was the only thing in the house that seemed out of place. Curious, Emily approached it. As she stood before the mirror, she noticed something odd. Her reflection didn't quite match her movements. She raised her hand, and her reflection did the same, but there was a slight delay. Then, her reflection smiled, a wicked, unnatural grin that Emily knew she hadn't made. Her heart raced as she stepped back, but her reflection stepped forward, its smile widening, its eyes darkening. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and her reflection reached out, grabbing Emily by the wrist. The glass was cold, almost burning to the touch. Emily tried to pull away, but the grip was too strong. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the house. With one final tug, the reflection pulled Emily through the mirror, and she found herself in a twisted version of the mansion. The walls were warped, the colors muted and sickly. She looked around in horror, realizing she was trapped in the mirror's world, with no way out. Her reflection now free stood on the other side, watching her with that same malevolent smile. Emily wandered through this distorted version of the house, but no matter where she went, she always ended up back in front of the mirror. Days, weeks, months passed, she couldn't tell. Time seemed to stand still in this place, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of the Sinclairs, of their tragic deaths, and how they were lured into the mirror by their own reflections. One night, as Emily sat before the mirror, exhausted and defeated, she heard a different voice, a child's voice, soft and kind. It told her there was a way out, but it came with a price. Emily had to make a choice: stay in the mirror world forever or take someone else's place. Desperate, Emily chose the latter. The child's voice told her to wait for someone to look into the mirror and then reach out, just as her reflection had done to her. Years passed, and Emily became a part of the house, her spirit bound to the mirror, waiting for someone to free her. One stormy night, a new group of thrill-seekers entered the house, and among them was a young woman, curious and brave. As she stood before the mirror, Emily's heart ached with guilt, but the voice whispered in her ear, reminding her of the choice she had made. When the woman looked into the mirror, Emily reached out, her hand trembling. But as their fingers touched, she hesitated. She saw the fear in the woman's eyes and remembered her own terror. Emily couldn't do it. She couldn't condemn someone else to her fate. In that moment of mercy, the mirror cracked, and Emily felt a rush of air as she was pulled back into the real world. The house trembled, the whispers turned to screams, and the mirror shattered, releasing all the trapped souls. Emily woke up in the overgrown yard, the mansion behind her crumbling to the ground. She was free, but she knew she would never forget the lesson the house had taught her, that the choices we make, even in desperation, define who we are. Compassion and mercy, even in the darkest moments, can break the cycle of suffering. Lesson: the story teaches the importance of compassion and the consequences of our choices. Even when faced with fear or desperation, choosing to do the right thing, even at personal cost, can lead to redemption and break the cycle of harm.